tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Our guests are Agapi Stassinopoulos and Aasif Mandvi. I have a big mouthful of names to say today. Actress, author Agapi Stassinopoulos was born and raised in Greece. She studied at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London and has been in this country splitting her time between the East Coast and the West Coast. We're going to talk to her about her latest book, Conversations with the Goddesses, but we're going to cover conversations by a lot of other people too, Agapi. How are you?
Hi, Joan.
How did your book come about?
Well, it started really a long time ago because it started, I would say, when I was in Athens and my mother used to read me the Greek stories. And then I used to see the statues, the beautiful Greek statues of the goddesses and the gods. And I felt their awesomeness, I felt their sacredness, and I felt that they had something to say. But it wasn't until later that I went to drama school. And in the characters of the plays, from Phaedra to Tennessee Williams, Maggie on the Cat on the Hot Tin Roof, to Blanche Dubois, to Nora in Ibsen's To Shakespeare, I started to see that these characters had a voice, and it fitted the voice of the goddesses. So I started to make the connections.
So it went back, and it came forward, and it came even more forward to today.
That's right, and it travels, and it traveled from then, and I always say that the gods and goddesses are international. They're not just Greek. They belong to all of us because they came out of the collective unconscious. They're archetypes, and we created them.
One of the great things, though, you talk about the Greek gods. In your book, you have the Greek name, and
yes,
you have
and
the Latin name.
Because a lot of people know them by the Latin name. I mean, how many times haven't you heard the name Minerva for Athena, or Ceres for Demeter, or Venus for Aphrodite.
For Aphrodite, that's
our love.
Right. That's right. We love Aphrodite.
Who doesn't love Aphrodite?
We're going back 3,000 years, but you're saying that those things can affect our lives today.
That's right. In understanding them, we understand ourselves better. We understand how we are made. We understand forces in us that we might not be able to quite understand and explain.
How could we incorporate that in our lives?
Okay, many ways. For example, a woman who might be under the archetype of Demeter, who is the mother goddess, who is the goddess of the earth, goddess of fertility, and she would have a tremendous drive and nurturing to have children and to nurture her children. Not only women who are mothers are under the archetype of Demeter, there are many women who are also become nurturers by the fact that of who they are. And for example, a woman like that might want to incorporate more of her Aphrodite. That will bring her more joy, that will bring her more fun, more beauty, more sensuality. She might be lacking in the romantic aspect of her life.
We're talking about a nurturer, and we call them the Mother Earth type.
That's
but
right.
You're just putting a different name on it, really.
Yes. I'm putting a name of Demeter because that is the archetype of the Demeter. But a lot of women that I know, and I'm sure you do, are nurturers and caretakers. And we can go a little overboard, or we might not know our boundaries, and we might get depleted. And for example, in incorporating a goddess and an archetype like Artemis, that is really the goddess of boundaries and independence, we might be able to then become more integrated.
So you're saying that we're not just one.
We're
it's not just Demeter.
One. Absolutely. It's part of the spectrum, and we are within that spectrum. Each one of us has more light or color in one of them and maybe less in another one. So I always say, well, if Aphrodite is in the closet, it's time to bring her out. Or if you're too much of an Aphrodite, but maybe your Athena has been under the carpet, let's bring her out, and maybe she has something to teach you. Maybe there are goals and aspirations you have in your life. And if we integrate each quality, and we should name them actually so that our viewers can also know the 7 qualities, I call them the 7 aspects of that spectrum of the diamond, then we become more integrated and more fulfilled. And also, we're not stressed.
You call them the diamond because they're all facets, right?
Facets, that's right, facets.
I was in Cyprus recently, and of course they talk about the goddesses all over the island.
That's
of
right.
course, it's Cypriot, the Greeks are there.
Yes.
And I went to the spot where Aphrodite allegedly rose out of the
Aegean.
sea.
Yes.
And we have a picture we're going to show, but will you tell us the story about this?
Yes.
There's the big rock.
Yes. Well, she was actually born out of, the myth has it that Kronos castrated his father Uranus, and out of his testicles that fell in the Aegea created a tremendous sea foam, and out of it was born Aphrodite in the seashell, and she was naked, of course, and she came out fully naked and fully beautiful and formed in the most exquisite sensual way that she was, and it's so beautifully portrayed in the Birth of Venus of Botticelli's.
Botticelli, everyone painted her though.
Yeah, everybody.
We have the Botticelli. We have a picture of that. We're going to show that also while you're talking about
the
it.
Botticelli, and we have the Titian, and there are like thousands of pictures of Aphrodite all over art, and there are thousands of poems written by her. And I actually have found a delicious poem that I think fits her very much, and it's called An Homage to My Hips.
My hips?
My hips, that's right, my hips. And she says, I do it in my show, and she says, these hips are big hips. They don't fit into petty little places. They need space to move around in. These hips have never been enslaved. They go where they want to go. They do what they want to do. These hips are mighty hips. These hips are free hips. These hips are magic hips. I have known them to put a spell on a man and spin him around like a top.
She's great.
See, that's Aphrodite's freedom.
She knows what to do.
She knows what to do. And did you know about Aphrodite's magic girdle?
No, but I know she didn't care about the treadmill if she said these.
No, that was Artemis.
She cared about the treadmill. Tell us about the magic girdle, then tell us
the
about
magic,
Artemis.
that's right. She didn't care about it, or not eating the low-fat diet. She was not on a low-fat diet. See, that's one of the things I really stress in the book, and also in my show, and when I talk to people, is that this is not about sizes. Aphrodite is not about size. It's about this tremendous freedom and love of one's body and beauty, and really being able to allow our senses to come alive. I mean, flowers, she loves flowers. Women always say, well, how can I bring Aphrodite to life? And I said, dance. I mean, you don't have to necessarily be in a relation. Make yourself always beautiful, have flowers around, perfume. She loves that part of ourselves that is sensual.
So that's what we should try to do to make that, to make ourselves aware.
More aware, exactly. And I read a great line once that said, the greatest Aphrodite never jogged. I mean, you can't imagine, Rita Hayworth or Marilyn Monroe, Cleopatra jogging. I mean,
exactly.
They never rushed. They never rushed. They were just, everything was more leisurely. There's more time.
But how do you...
you change the modalities.
Oh, you do?
You've got to change your modalities. And I think it's, as women, we always juggle a lot. And I think, we can have our modality of being purposeful and efficient, self-directed like Athena's. And then, we can incorporate that at other times.
Tell me about her girdle.
Her girdle was her magic girdle that a lot of goddesses borrowed. And when you put it on, you felt completely attracted to the opposite sex was completely attracted to you. They were like, they couldn't resist you.
So is this psychological? You're putting something on?
Yeah, I think it's really back to the hips. It's back to our hips. It's like being able to really allow that freedom of your energy that is in your body, and a lot of it is in the hips, to really be free. And, belly dancers carry that.
Right.
And it's not being stiff in our own bodies, and bringing that sexual, sensual, creative energy, because it's also creative. I always make the parallel a lot that a lot of the times in our creative energies, we feel the presence of Aphrodite. When we are creative, when we write, when we are
that's
just
how
creative,
I feel. That's
you know,
how I
you feel this aliveness.
Yeah, that's how I
I
feel.
mean, Aphrodite has to do with aliveness a lot.
That's why I was so happy to be at the Rock. I felt like I was emerging. I was in the water. They took this picture at the water, and Cyprus is so beautiful that you do feel the gods everywhere following
power.
you around. I guess it's the power. When you
nature.
did your one-woman show, did you need a director to direct you?
I did have
or-
a director who helped me with the music because we had live music.
That's what I...
And we had some instruments there, and you know, the lighting, and it was more structured, and sometimes I do it in a more structured way where I tell the mythology and the stories, and then I do the monologues for each goddess.
Oh, one goddess, Hera.
Yes,
I have
Hera.
a beautiful
Do you love
picture
Hera?
of her.
Yes,
Tell us
Hera
about
is the
her.
queen. She is Mrs. Zeus.
Ah.
She is married to the king.
Look, she's so beautiful.
She's so beautiful and royal.
Uh-huh.
She has the royalty. She carries herself.
Was she a good queen?
She was, well, she had a lot to complain about because Zeus was always running around with the nymphs and anybody that walked, he mated with. He fathered most of the children. But Hera is a very powerful archetype, Joan. It's an archetype that has a lot to do with the principles of marriage and partnership.
Yes.
And when you look at women who are one with their husbands, the Mrs. and Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, they're immediately, you will identify them as Heras. First ladies.
Yes, are Heras.
Are
That's
Heras.
interesting.
I mean, Hillary Clinton, definitely a Hera. Nancy Reagan, definitely a Hera. Any woman who is like in partnership with her husband.
Before we finish this afternoon, your sister Ariana Huffington wrote a book. She was Stassinopoulos when she wrote the book
That's
about Maria
right.
Callas,
Yes.
because I read the book. It was fabulous.
Thank you.
And was Maria Callas a goddess?
Yes, she expressed a lot of aspects. I think she was in many ways undefined because her Aphrodite and her Hera were very unfulfilled.
Her Hera was unfulfilled.
She wanted to
wasn't
get
with-
married,
Yes.
so she never got that together. So that Hera was very unhappy inside of her. And the Aphrodite, again, because she never found that love she was seeking. But in her expression of her singing and her art, which is also would come under Aphrodite, would be I tell you an archetype that she had tremendously developed, her Athena. She was extremely hardworking, extremely purposeful, and extremely goal-oriented. She knew what she wanted, she achieved it. That's very Athena. Okay, so her Athena got her to the level of success and to the level of fame and actually a tremendous accomplishment apart from her gift, because many people might have the gift, but she carried it through. She worked it. She was like an athlete in her terms of how she worked it.
So she had two strong goddesses.
Yes.
And then she had the Hera fighting them.
Fighting them. The Hera, there was one story where one day she just wanted to develop these very long red nails, which she had her nails very long. And Zeffirelli went up to her and said, what are you doing? I mean, she was playing the piano. Of course, she couldn't play. And she was ready to give it all up to get married, because that's what she really wanted. She wanted Onassis more than anything.
And she didn't have him.
She didn't have him, but God bless her, she gave so much joy with her gift.
She did. She
And
had
you
a
see,
gift.
we all have gifts. And we all, I mean, I believe that. I think we all have gifts. And when we find them and shine the light on them, then we can express ourselves, which is what I think we all really want. And what the goddesses give us is permission to express other aspects of ourselves that we might not have quite defined.
Right. Well, poor Maria didn't get her, but we got you today.
Thank
and
you.
we got your book.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joan.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with actor, author Aasif Mandvi. Welcome back. I'm Joan Quinn. Writer-performer Aasif Mandvi was born in Bombay and raised in the north of England, where he began acting at the age of 10. For only being in the United States for the last 16 years, he has quite a lot of experience. Just to mention a few of his things, he's been in TV on Nash Bridges and Law and Order. He's been on the big screen and Analyze This, The Siege, and Die Hard. He was in Eric Bogosian's Suburbia at Lincoln Center and at the Variety Arts Theater, Death Defying Acts. His play, Sakina's Restaurant, ran 6 months off Broadway, didn't it? And you got 2 Obies for that. Where should we start? Should we start at the restaurant and talk about the people who come there?
Okay, let's start at the restaurant. Yeah, Sakina's Restaurant is the story of a family. Actually, it's called Sakina's Restaurant, but it's like it's not really about a restaurant. I mean, it's about a restaurant in the way that It's a Wonderful Life is about a savings and loan. You know, it's sort of about a family really that owns this restaurant.
So you wrote the play.
I did,
and you act all the roles in it.
I play 6 different characters.
And it's based, tell us what it's based on.
It's based on a restaurant in New York's East Village.
Oh, it actually is based on a restaurant.
No, it's not a real restaurant. It's a fictional restaurant.
But I mean, it's the idea, right?
Yeah. And it's based on a family, my family actually. I took characters from my family, my parents, my sister, myself, and sort of dramatized them and created a story about, it's about immigrants. It's about coming to a different country. It's about family dynamics, culture, tradition, religion, all of those things.
Did your family talk to you after they saw it?
Yeah.
How did you depict them?
Well, you know, I think all the characters are portrayed pretty fairly in that, you know, I go sort of beneath the surface of each character and try to find out what really makes them tick. And my mother, you know, saw the show, and when I did it in Toronto recently, and she came up and saw it, and it was interesting for her because I am depicting a character based on her at a time in her life when she was actually younger than I am now. So it was very surreal for her to see her son playing her, I think.
But you also play these roles. You play your sister. Tell us how you move around that stage, like it's been so beautifully choreographed.
Oh, thank you.
And everything's in its place, and the lighting changes, because I think when you do a solo performance, you have to keep the audience aware and right with you.
Yeah. Well, you know, the characters are all actually sort of parts of me, even though I base them on other characters. You know, the title character, Sakina, originally when I started writing her, I thought, well, this is my sister, but then I realized it's sort of my sister. It's not. It's a lot of me in there as well, you know. And Hakeem is the owner of the restaurant, and my dad's name really is Hakeem, so I think he feels sort of immortalized by the fact that I've written a character in a play, you know, based on him.
The thing is, can someone else play this? Can someone else do this play?
You know, not as well as me, but no. But I should give it a shot. No, I think eventually, you know, we've had. The great thing about this show is after we did it in New York and we won the Obies and everything, it's gotten so much attention, especially within the South Asian community in this country, that we have gotten offers to do it in every city in America where there's a South Asian, you know, number of Indian and Pakistanis.
Subcontinent.
Yeah, the subcontinent. Right, that's it. Yeah, you know. So,
let's be correct.
Right.
About
So
this.
you know. So yeah. So you know, eventually I might get another actor to sort of take it on.
Because you know, late night Catechism started out with the one person who wrote it, and she was in it. She was the stand-up person.
Right.
But then they have
other
late night catechisms all over the country.
Right.
And someone else is playing it.
Right. I mean, I think it's a very personal show. It's a very. I mean, I wrote it, and so of course I have a sense of it. But I think that I could sit down with somebody and teach it to them.
When we talked about you in the opening, you were already acting in England. How did that happen?
Well, when I was a kid, I actually decided I wanted to be an actor when I was very young. I was one of those fortunate people that decided that I wanted to,
and you
knew what I wanted to do when I was like 10 years old. So I was actually part of a children's theater, and that's when I wrote my first play when I was
That's amazing.
13.
So when you came to the U.S., you did your schooling here?
I went to high school and college here in Florida.
Oh, in Florida.
My parents lived down in Florida, and then I moved to New York in '91.
I see.
And
did you get an agent easily, or were you working in Florida?
You know, I took a little bit of time. I was sort of standing in line outside of the Equity Building in New York City on 46th Street for a while, and it was funny because I actually walked past, when I first got to New York, I walked down 46th Street, past the American Place Theater.
Oh, right.
And Sam Shepard and John Malkovich walked out of the American Place Theater, and I was like, it was my first celebrity sighting. You know, I'd been in New York like 3 days, you know, and I go, wow, and I look up and I go, what is this building where these famous people are walking out of? And I said the American Place Theater, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to like perform here? And then cut to 10 years later, I did my one-man show at the American Place Theater. Yeah.
And you did use a director, obviously.
Hughes,
Tell us about him.
Her.
Oh, her. Oh, who was it?
Kim Hughes.
Oh, Kim Hughes.
Yes.
I thought the person who directed you was Wynn Handman.
Well, Wynn Handman is the artistic director of the American Place Theater, and he helped with the development of the show.
I see.
Because I studied with him for about 4 years.
So that was the next question. When you came from Florida,
Right.
you had to study, right?
Right. So I studied with Wynn, and I actually told him, and he worked with Leguizamo and Bogosian and people like that. And I said, you know, I have this one-man show that I want to develop, and he said, come on down and show it to me. So I showed it to him, and he took me into his acting class, and we developed it there. And then I went to Kim afterwards, and those wonderful transitions that you talked about in the show and the way they move around is all really Kim's work.
But not what you could do. You get too close to seeing how your characters want to move on stage. You need someone else to tell you what to do.
You know, I think that what Kim brought to it was a sense of flow, a sense of movement to the whole piece. I mean, I had the characters already, and the narrator of the story is a young waiter from India called Azgi, and Kim and I improvised a lot of that character's development. Like she would do what's called character interviews with me. She would ask me questions, and I would be him. And then, so she sort of brought the show together in terms of its movement, of its flow, the way the music and the lights and everything sort of all come together. And I think the way the piece looks and the way the piece moves is a lot of her direction.
Now, since you've been acting so long, and since you were an actor, well, you were actually an actor in England, so. You can't get typecast as an Indian actor, can you?
Well, I can, and often do.
Is that what happens?
But, you know, I mean, it's, you know.
You don't have an accent.
I don't, do I? No, I mean,
no accent. So you had to work on your Indian accent when you did the play.
Well, I had to work on that, and that was actually a tough thing because I hadn't ever grown up with an Indian accent.
And you don't have a Bradford accent?
Well, I used to, you know. I was taught just like this when I lived in England, you know.
Did you?
I was taught like a Bradford, a Northerner, you know. Oh. So, but when I first came to the States, I had a very North England accent, you know, but...
did anyone understand you?
Yeah, people used to ask me if I knew the Beatles and stuff. It was very weird, you know, like I got here and was in high school, and sort of made me popular for a little while, I think. But yeah, so, yeah. So,
about being typecast.
Yeah, being typecast. So I think that inevitably happens in this business, you know, that you get typecast. I think that things are hopefully changing a little bit. You know, I go out for things now, I think that are not necessarily always Indian roles, you know.
But you can play any kind of ethnic role, probably.
Yeah, you know.
But it's still a typecast kind of situation, isn't it?
I think, you know, here we are in LA, and I think Hollywood sort of is slow to change in that respect, you know. I think that, but I find myself going out for television and film projects, and in Analyze This, I'll never forget, Harold Ramis cast me as the doctor, as the young resident in the hospital, and it was the character's name was Dr. Shulman. And he cast me, and I remember being on the set.
And
I said, you know, are you going to change the guy's name because in the credits it still says Dr. Shulman.
Oh,
so you know they never changed it. So that was kind of a real.
So it is great then. They're just casting you because you're an actor who can do something.
Yeah, so that was a really nice thing. You know, that he didn't care that I was Indian or not. You know, it wasn't about that. So. That was a really great...
Well, that was a breakthrough.
Yeah, and that's happening a little bit more every now and then. But, you know, the inevitability of being typecast always exists. I mean, the fact is, the majority of roles that I go off for television and film are still Indian or...
You talked about going back to Bradford, which is so Pakistani. I didn't know how... Bradistan.
As they say in East is East.
East is East. Right. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
And depicted everything. Would you ever think about going back to India, to Bombay? Have you been to Bombay?
You know, we're thinking of actually taking Sakina's restaurant to India. We're thinking of taking it to London, And
London, I can see,
and
be great.
And we're and I think there's a possibility of touring it around England. There's including Bradford, and then there's then also India is a possibility of taking it to Bombay.
But the thing that I was talking about with India as an actor, because they have a pretty big film community.
Yeah.
Could you go back and become a leading man in India?
I guess I could. I mean, I don't speak Hindi well enough, unfortunately.
Oh, you would have to do
so
them.
I think that I don't have the, and it's it's as hard to break into films over there as it is out here. So I figure I speak English, so I might as well.
But do you speak Hindi at all? I don't
I
speak
speak
it
a
very
little
well.
bit. I speak a little bit of Hindi, but they'd have to make everything phonetic for me. And
Tell us one thing one of your characters would have said from the play, from Sakina's Restaurant.
Well, there's a great line that I use a lot which sort of sums up the play for me, and it's Asgi turns to the audience at one point and he says, "Every night I have the same dream. I'm a giant tandoori chicken wearing an Armani suit," which I think sort of sums up is the thesis statement for the play, really, So.
It is, because we kept thinking about food. Do people think, where's the closest Indian restaurant
Right,
after that?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
What else are you writing? Do you continue to write?
I'm actually writing a feature based on the characters from the show.
Oh, could that turn into a movie?
Yeah, we're actually writing it right now. We have some interest, and so we're finishing up our first draft as we do this interview. So hopefully that will be ready to go by next year or something. And I have some projects lined up for later in the year.
Would you be in a movie? Would you cast yourself in it?
In it? Yeah. Well, I guess I would.
Well,
it wouldn't be a one-man thing. It would
no,
be
because you'll have different characters, right?
Yeah. But it's the story of the film is a little bit different than the play, but it's got some of the same characters. It deals with an Indian restaurant and a family and all of the same kind of interdynamics.
Before we leave, what do you prefer? Do you prefer film or stage work?
I never like to choose one or the other. A film obviously pays better, but the point is that it's both. They're two different muscles. You know what I mean? Film work is very immediate and very intimate and very right there, right here. The camera's always right here, And stage work is about sustaining. It's more like a long distance runner, It's more than film work feels like sprinting, and stage work is like a long distance run.
Because of how many times you have to be on stage?
Yeah, and the stamina, and you got to keep recreating the same experience over and over and over again. When we did this show for 6 months in New York, I really learned what that was all about. And even here at the Odyssey Theater in LA, doing it for 8 or 9 weeks, you have to find the stamina to keep on performing every night and get to those emotional highs and sustain them every night, So it's a different muscle.
Well, we sprinted through this.
Oh, well,
we sprinted, we're
it's
through.
already.
It's fast, wasn't it fast? And you don't have to do it again.
I don't. That's it.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for being with us today on the Joan Quinn Profiles. See you next time, and keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, and we'll answer all of your questions. Los Angeles, 917.